This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz?
So are we in day 94 of quarantine, or is this the first episode post-quarantine? Where are we at here? I don't even know what's going on anymore.
Well, it's a very good question to ask because things are getting back to normal, but coronavirus still is wreaking havoc all over the South. I mean, Florida, my sister had a trip planned, had to cancel it because of the rash of coronavirus that's ravaging Florida, Houston, Arizona. Look, it's not going away, and despite the fact that we all are getting back to normal, I think the overriding consensus is, hell, if you get it, you get it. Who cares? You're going to pretty much survive it. So people are living, people are getting out and about. You're hearing about gyms potentially opening on Friday. So people are getting back to their lives, but this coronavirus isn't going away lightly, especially in the world of sports. You're hearing about now baseball teams getting ravaged by it. College football teams are getting ravaged by it. So for me, I guess we're going to classify it as we're still in quarantine. We're still dealing with the coronavirus, even though things are opening. I still think as long as the word distancing is in our lexicon, we can't move forward. We still, I think, should distance and wear a mask, and I think I'm going to roll with it until the end of the year, wearing a mask and everything like that. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
So I'm back to work now, and like you said, gyms are about to reopen, and I'm a manager of a gym, and all of the protocols that we've got in place are going to make my life a living hell. It's going to suck so bad. If any of you guys out there go to gyms, please try to do your best to social distance and wipe your machines down. The staff are going to be under so much pressure to constantly be cleaning. And it's going to be absolutely insane. On top of it, you try wearing a mask and running around and doing things. It gets hot. It's uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly.
And now everybody has to wear a mask. This is absolutely crazy. Like, post-quarantine life is going to be nuts, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. So my hope is that we can kind of move through this phase quickly and end up on the other end in a much, much better place.
Yeah. So major news was made with the Detroit Lions. And it's weird, too, because obviously I'm part of the media now covering the Detroit Lions. And one of the first things that was said was, I'm sorry, guys, because this month, around the time of June 15th to July 20th, it's the time when all the writers take vacation because the offseason program is basically done. Not a lot of media availability is going to take place. So they make this announcement and force all the reporters that are on vacation back to work. Typical Lions. Now, it doesn't apply to me. I'm grinding along, and I'll probably take time around the 4th of July holiday, but typical Lions to make news of this nature at a time when they know that all the reporters are gone. So it's just funny the manner in which they conduct themselves. I thought it was funny that, I don't know if it came across, but the new Lions owner, Shelia Ford Hamp, had a little bit of a hard time connecting to her first audio session. So the first couple minutes were us just waiting for her to be on because she said hello, and then there's nothing for a couple minutes. So that was a dubious start, but I listened to it. Look, the questions were fair, a little bit wordy by the media, but, maybe a couple things that weren't really addressed in the, manner in which I would do it. So I'm taking notes for those that are paying attention. The first year or so, I figured I was just going to take a lot of notes and observe how questions are asked, how things are done. I've sprinkled in a couple questions here and there, but for the most part, I've laid low to get a sense of how these things go. And I get a sense of the attempt by the media to play nicey nice and things like that. Certain media members will come direct and things like that. But there are certain things that enter my mind that I think people want to know about. And the one that I jotted down that was not asked was about Matthew Stafford and the commitment level of the organization going forward. I wrote that down in something like, okay, now going forward, I'll prep in a way that will allow me to ask questions and not be afraid. I don't care anymore. Cared a little bit what people thought. Now I don't care. I know I'm in the mix of being able to ask a question that I would want to know about. And I thought that the session was okay. It was professional, but it came across weird in my mind mine, and I'll get a sense of what you thought, because she's been on the job basically for the last 6 years learning from her mom, but the tone in which she expressed herself was one of like, well, I've only been on the job for 3 hours. I got to take a stance, and I got to get with Mr. Rod Wood and learn about more aspects of the organization. What were you doing for the last 6 years? You should be like ready to go. Like, okay, she's asked point blank, what does it mean in terms of this mandate? You kind of let it out in terms of what you were thinking about Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, but clarify it. And she said something that we'll talk about that I think is going to save Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn. So she was wishy-washy there. Came across to me as professional, but this is what happens when you get older NFL owners that are not exactly in touch with the sports fan. And I guess the way I would look at it is she's ultimately professional. She's got a team around her that's kind of prepping her, but I want more of a Mark Cuban Lions owner that's just out and about and is like going to be, no, this is important. This is what we need. Instead, we get more of a laid back kind of hoity-toity type of an owner, which I understand. Look, that's her lot in life. That's her position. But by and large, it doesn't ring home to me like, okay, the Lions got a new owner, because it's just an extension of the family that was already owning it. So when the owner is 94 years old, eventually speaking, she's going to hand it down. And so now the Shelia Ford Hamp era has begun. But Lions fans, if you're listening to Doc and Jock, you know what we're going to say. It's going to be more of the same. And I don't know. It didn't ring to me like we got a massive owner that's going to come in and just change the culture. It did not come across to me that way.
And I don't think it should. I mean, at this point, everything that she knows is either her father or her mother. So she doesn't know any different. This is just an organization, and this is going to come across as very, very harsh, but this is just an organization that is owned by a loser family. And I'm not saying that they themselves are losers, but historically, this franchise just takes L's. And she doesn't know any different. She doesn't know what it's like to be a winner. She doesn't know what it's like. She doesn't have that in her DNA. So why should it come across any different? Why should it be spelled out any different? Why should it have a different feel? Like you said, it's just an extension. This is an extension of Mr. Ford to Martha Ford to now Shelia Ford. That's all it is. And I'll be honest with you, when the news broke that she was taking over, and we've known that she's going to be the one who's going to be handed the organization, I was like, man, like I almost wish that it was Bill Ford Jr. who was taking over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like, he hasn't been in the picture for years. This is an organization that has conducted itself the same exact way and gets the same exact results. And I don't think as a Lions fan, you should expect really anything different. Now, she could come in here and she could blow our doors off. I mean, it basically, she's been on the job now for 2 days, but really and truly, like you said, she's been on the job for 6 years, learning at the knee of her mom. But I don't know if we're going to get those immediate results that we want. I don't think she's going to be that owner that we want. I mean, both you and I love Mark Cuban. We love what Mark Cuban stands for. We love what Mark Cuban does. She's not that type. She's going to be just like her mother, just like her father. Now, is she smart enough and is she adapt enough to be able to put people in positions to help kind of coach her along and help carry her along? I mean, it's going to remain to be seen, but I'm not expecting a whole lot that's going to be different.
Yeah, the fascinating part was many people, when we tweeted out that there was new ownership, not given the best detail, thought that, oh, maybe there was a sale. Maybe it's actually happening. People just want the organization to be sold to a completely different family so that it can be run properly. But no, that's not what's going to happen. It's Shelia Ford Hamp. She's somebody that's been involved, been in the mix, but something that obviously caught the attention of a lot of people, and something that might bode well for Matt Patricia. She basically said this is going to be a weird year like 3 or 4 times. And by saying that, she hinted that coronavirus could save Matt Patricia's job. And let me lay it out for you. If you're Matt Patricia and you recognize, okay, I got to win more games and things like that, something could happen that could keep him in line for another year. Year 4 for Matt Patricia could happen if his team gets ravaged by coronavirus, or if the league does not complete an entire season. If they get through 8-9 games and then coronavirus just has this massive wave across the country, you can't potentially fire Matt Patricia if you're 4-5 and the league shuts down. So Matt Patricia comes out, and Bob Quinn come out rosy with the new owners because of the fact that she did not say playoff or bust. It was pretty much asked in that manner. It was skirted around in terms of, can you just clarify what you meant? And she basically said drastic improvement. Well, if you go from 3 to 7, that's drastic, but that's not in the playoffs. So it probably should have been asked more point blank, but coronavirus could end up saving Matt Patricia. How wild is that?
Dude, I've never in a million years, even when they came out with their decree of playoffs or bust, or there has to be dramatic changes, I never believed that this organization was getting rid of these two. Not one day in my life. I knew they were coming back. No matter what happens this year. I mean, they could go 5-11 and she'd be like, well, it's 2 extra games we won. And, that's a dramatic enough improvement. We're making progress. We're headed in the right direction. Things look really, really good here. Never for one day did I ever believe that these guys were on the hot seat. They came out to say something to basically appease the fans, and that's been it. These guys are going nowhere. This is an organization that has regularly done things on the cheap. There was no way that they were going to pay a head coach and a GM for time that they weren't spending with the organization. So these guys were not going to be removed. They just weren't. They weren't going to pay them for 2 years to go sit on their couches. It's not how this organization works. Again, she is from the same DNA as her father and her mother, and she's learned at their behest. So it's all going to be the same. These guys are coming back. If you don't like Matt Patricia and you don't like Bob Quinn, strap yourself in, because you got at least 2 more seasons, possibly 3 seasons left of these guys. There's no way they're being moved out.
No way. And so now we get the news of a new Lions owner juxtaposed with the announcement that Troy Weaver comes in from OKC and is now the general manager. And he sounds, when you hear him, he sounds definitely like he's well-versed in the school of NBA. He understands draft. But here's the thing that caught everyone's attention. The main question that was asked was, hey, are you going to have final say? And, they did their best, Tom Gores and management, to say, hey, he's going to have elevated duties. But Troy Weaver's going to have to work in collaboration with Arm Tellem, with Ed Stefanski, with Gores. And so the general, and I guess this is kind of how it's done across the league. But the thing that has kind of concerned a lot of Piston supporters and what people who are in the know kind of express is there's too many hands in the pot. There's too many opinions. A general manager should come in and just handle business like Joe Dumars, where he just makes decisions and goes forward. But Troy Weaver, obviously, you would assume would not take this job unless he had a significant amount of say, but he's going to work together with all these people. And look, Arm Tellem is a former agent. So how do you think Derrick Rose got here? I will say this. The first thing that will determine to me if Troy Weaver is going to be successful is if day one Blake Griffin is on this roster, it's a failed regime. This is a rebuild. I don't care if you want to spit shine it and say it's a retool and a rebirth or whatever kind of nice way you're saying it. You got to tear this shit down and bring in talented individuals, and having Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin on this roster who are 90% going to get hurt in 2020 and 2021 is not the thing I'm looking for in terms of moving forward with the Pistons. So for me, Troy Weaver comes in and he's just another employee. So you got to come out here and say, okay, I'm going to make this move. I'm going to be drastic and I'm going to move on from these veterans that we don't need. We have to actually. And he came out and said publicly, I don't believe in tanking. He's not going to go down that approach. He's going to try and still win at the same time, which I don't get because it's just a stupid mantra of delaying winning. But that's what he came in and said. He doesn't believe in it. But in my mind, I think he has a better chance of being successful because he's got a basketball mind. He was the guy that believed in Russell Westbrook. But also, you got to remember, he didn't win a title. He wasn't part of a team that got there, got close, but wasn't part of an organization that actually had consistent success at the highest levels. Now, it's the Eastern Conference. He's got a better chance. I think we got the right guy, but I'm not a fan of this collaborative effort, especially with these guys. Now, if it was all his guys he brought in and he wanted to collaborate, no problem. But he's coming in, he's got to work with Ed, got to work with Arn, got to work with Tom, and they're all going to weigh in and give opinions. And you're talking about guys that wanted to potentially show love to Andre Drummond and bring in Blake Griffin. I mean, come on, and then they signed Derrick Rose. So does that get us any closer to winning? No. So Troy Weaver's got a tough job ahead of him. But in my mind, I think he's got at least a lot better chance of success than the Lions ownership, because they're married to Matthew Stafford and they're never letting go. They're never divorcing. We're going to be 50 before Stafford leaves the Lions organization.
So Troy Weaver was a guy who a few years ago when they were looking for a general manager and they ended up settling on Ed Stefanski as whatever his innocuous role is. Troy Weaver was a guy who we talked about on this very podcast, and I was kind of high on him. I liked him. Troy Weaver was there with drafting Russell Westbrook. He was there putting together that team of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and you got to remember, Westbrook and Harden, as well as Steven Adams, these guys were drafted later in the draft. KD was kind of a no-brainer. I mean, the big issue about him coming out of college was that he couldn't bench press. I mean, if you go back and you find the YouTube video of him trying to bench press, it's comical. But the guy grew up to be a stone-cold killer, one of the best players in the NBA. So I like Troy Weaver as the general manager, you're right, though. There is a lot of minutia that gets kind of kicked around. It's the way Tom Gores conducts business. Tom Gores, as an owner, really just needs to step back and just not be in charge of anything. Just be there, write checks, and if you have a question, you can go talk to Troy Weaver. You have a question, you can go talk to Ed Stefanski, but stay out of it. Let the basketball minds take over and do their job. And to me, it's a little bit strange that they're going with this whole mantra of we will have say, not Troy, we will have say. So it sounds like Ed Stefanski's still going to be heavy-handed. Arn Tellum's going to still be heavy-handed. Troy Weaver will have a say in everything. And I'm hoping that Gores has no say in anything. Now, as far as Blake Griffin goes, I don't think Troy Weaver is necessarily married to Blake. He's come out and he's like, yeah, we see a future with him. We want him here. But again, it all kind of sounds like window dressing. When you listen to the tone of his voice, it doesn't necessarily sound like he is sold on keeping Blake Griffin here. If you could trade Blake Griffin and you can get some type of chip for him, whether it be a draft pick or whether it be another player who is talented or that you see something in, I think you would be silly not to. If you're a good general manager, you have to look at the lay of the land. And Blake Griffin, when healthy, is a hell of a talent. But how often is Blake Griffin healthy? That's the problem. So if you can find a team who's like, yeah, we're willing to take that contract, or yeah, we're willing to take that player, and we're willing to give you something in exchange for it, you'd be a dummy not to do it. And I think he's smart enough to understand that. It'll be interesting to see if Blake is still here in a couple years, if they do work on extending him or re-signing him. I think I'm in the same boat as you where I'm totally checked out, and this organization will probably be doomed. I like Blake Griffin. I like Blake Griffin when he's healthy. I don't like what Blake Griffin brings with him because he brings with him bad knees, bad hips, a bad back, and just a laundry list of injuries. So if Troy Weaver can, move on or, like you said, retool or rebuild or do whatever you got to do to make this team competitive and make this team good and get good young players in here who want to be here, like build around Sekou. Sekou looks like he's going to be a stud. It would only make sense to build around this guy. You're going into next year's draft and you're going to have some high draft capital. You have the chance to really get a good standout player. You need to pair them with Sekou and really go in that direction. Not saying you need to forget about Blake Griffin, but you need to start to distance yourself and move away from that player because he's older and he's always beat up. But I think now that we have this so-called new blood in Detroit, and I use finger quotes when I say new blood because Shelia Ford Hamp is obviously old blood. And from what it sounds like the Pistons are doing, you're going to have quite a bit of old blood at the top working with Troy Weaver. Which one of these two do you think is going to have a more successful tenure in Detroit? Troy Weaver as the general manager of the Pistons or Shelia Ford Hamp as the new owner and CEO of the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know your thoughts at Detroit Podcast. Obviously, I think Adam and I both lean in the camp of the Pistons, but bottom line, it's going to be tough for both organizations because the Pistons are starting at less than square one because they haven't acknowledged a rebuild.
I don't think me and you are as close in lockstep as you might think. I'll let you finish, though. Continue.
Yeah, I just think that the Pistons have to tear it down. I mean, look what you just said. OKC was built on when they sucked for a period of 3 to 4 years at epic levels. They get KD, they get Harden, and they get Westbrook. Wow, what happened? You had high draft picks, you picked superstars, you started to win. I mean, what you're counting on Troy Weaver to do is to actually find talent and dig in. I think he can do it, but it's going to take longer. With the Lions, hell will freeze over. They'll be flying cars before potentially we see the Lions hoisting a Lombardi trophy in my mind.
That's funny. So as far as the Fords go, or Shelia Ford goes, the way I kind of look at it, right, is she's the owner of this team. So she has the extended tenure of being able to do what she wants, when she wants, as long as she wants. For me, general managers, unless you're successful early, you generally have a short shelf life. And I think Troy Weaver is a good enough GM, but is he going to be able to draw free agents here? Is he going to be able to build a winner? And is he going to be able to build this winner with an owner like Tom Gores, who seems to have a hand in the pie and seems to be meddling? And it seems as though Ed Stefanski carries a huge weight in what gets said and what gets done around the Pistons organization. Whereas Shelia Ford Hamp, we've already kind of talked about her being a little bit of a novice as an owner. But again, you've seen her mother own this team until she was about 94. Her father looked like he was the crypt keeper just up until his untimely death. So she has essentially a longevity where she could get things figured out and she could get things right. I'm going to double down on the fact that she has time and she is the head of the organization. So I'm going to give the nod to Shelia Ford Hamp as being the one who will probably be more successful in their tenure. But it's only because
only
she's got time. That's it.
Well, luckily, in regards to both of them, they both have at least a strong opportunity to get off on the right foot. Let's see some of their early decisions. Hamp's going to have a couple tough decisions. What to do about Stafford if he gets hurt again or has a subpar year or things don't go right. What do you do with Quinn and Patricia? And Weaver has a tough decision in regards to Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose. So it'll be interesting to watch. Stay tuned here to Doc and Jock as we break it all down, as we pick and choose and evaluate and decide who we think is best. And then you throw in Steve Yzerman to the mix. Upper management's getting a little bit better. Bob Quinn, you can make the argument, is almost trailing in the rear now in regards to some of the general managers. It's probably, you would probably say Al Avila is probably the general manager that we have the least amount of confidence in. And then you start to work your way up. So management's getting a little bit better here in Detroit, and hopefully that signals a turnaround. So speaking of Al Avila, finally, cuz baseball figured it out after negotiation, after agreement sent back and forth, denials. Baseball is going to start with a 60-game season. July 1st, they're going to report. I mean, obviously, I think that the way and the manner in which the players and the owners handled this, I just feel like was really tough and terse and not really the most professional, but it's back. So for me, I'm excited for the shortened season just to get some sports back. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, my excitement is a 6.5. But I'm excited because you're hearing about this concept of a taxi squad where a bunch of the draft picks can be on it, and potentially we could see a Torkelson if something happens in terms of coronavirus, and we have an opportunity to, maybe see some of the young cats like Casey Mize, some of the young pitchers. And so for me, I'm excited to see what happens. But, with the Tigers, there's not a lot of expectations.
Yeah, I'm excited for baseball to come back too. But then again, I'm a guy who gets excited to watch two pigeons fight over a piece of bread. So on a scale of 1 to 10 for baseball, I'm probably at about a 7. I mean, I know I woke up this morning and I was excited for this segment. When we put our rundown together and we slid baseball in here, I was excited for this specific segment. So maybe I'm a little bit more excited than a 7. I'm just happy that we're going to be getting sports back. Now, what I find interesting is we are going to have a shortened season. Baseball is a weird sport because baseball is a sport where everything always averages out over the course of 162 games. You can start hot. You can start red hot for probably about 3 weeks. And then you go through this stretch where you just totally cool off. And then by the end of it all, Miguel Cabrera's hit 305. And that's what his career average is. You know what I'm saying? It all ends up averaging out. And then there are times where you as a team can rip off 10, 15 wins. Next thing you know, you go on a losing streak for 20 games and you end up finishing somewhere third in the Central. It's a weird sport where everything averages out over the course of 162 games. Now, you've shortened that basically down to a third, and we're playing a 60-game sprint. So this is going to be a really, really weird season where you could basically throw all the records out because you're not going to have that longevity where guys can go on extended cold streaks to kind of average out some of their extended hot streaks. And it got me to thinking, as a fan, and you're a huge Tigers fan, as a fan, are you rooting for, say, a hot start by these Detroit Tigers so they could possibly slip into the playoffs and possibly make some noise? Because I could totally see a scenario where if this team stays healthy, you could have this team get into the playoffs and possibly win a World Series if things kind of fall appropriately for them. So say a team ends up getting coronavirus and now they've got a quarantine for 14 days. Say the Yankees end up losing their first 2 starting pitchers. So now they're digging deep into the rotation and the guys just aren't as good as your number 1 and your number 2 guy. So are the Tigers able to kind of go ham on them in say like a 2 or 3 game stretch? And then do they kind of fall in the rankings? And then when you head into the playoffs, do say the Yankees and maybe say Oakland gets there and Oakland has a couple guys who end up getting sick with the coronavirus. And next thing you know, you got to quarantine guys over playoff runs. But the Tigers somehow remain healthy and are able to advance in the playoffs and get to a World Series. Should fans be rooting for this? Or should fans kind of take the approach of, we need to kind of use this as basically spring training. We need these guys to get better. We need them to work on things, build their game, and basically put all the eggs in the basket of 2021.
Exactly. And losing would provide you another high draft pick. Spencer Torkelson, Casey Mize, high draft picks. Riley, you realize that you have an opportunity in 2020 to at least see some improvement with some of the young cats across the minor leagues and at the big club. Really, 60 games, it's kind of a wasted season. There's going to be probably some weird rules that obviously you can go check out. It's not a real season. It's an asterisk year. So it's just an extended training camp and things like that. I'm not heavily invested in what the Tigers do this year. I just want potentially, if it's A+, get another top 5 draft pick, and then we can move forward with a real strong 2021. So in terms of what you said, I'm throwing everything in terms of next season. This year's a wash. I mean, 60 games, you could get hot. What does it do for the Tigers? Wouldn't that be funny? How would you feel, cuz, if they make a deep playoff run and get to the pennant this year in a shortened season? Would that have value to you? It wouldn't to me.
That's a tough question, man. It'd be nice because we'd see some winning baseball, right? I don't think it really has value in the overall scheme of things because I think it would be this is a team that is probably near and dear to yours and mine heart. The 2006 team. The 2006 team wasn't supposed to do that. They weren't supposed to be that good. It was kind of an aberration that they were that good. And then they ended up getting to the World Series where they took on a horrible Phillies team or a horrible St. Louis team that was marginally better than them. The wheels just fell off in the World Series for them. But it would be nice to see winning baseball. I don't think in the grand scheme of things, it helps you out a ton. I think as the season goes along, I think you utilize it as a extended spring training. Like you said, you get some guys some work, you kind of build for 2021. Now, what I will tell you is if there is a point in the season where we'll say roughly 20 games to go, this team's in a spot where they're 1 or 2, maybe 3 games out from a playoff run, or this team's a couple games out of taking the Central, I think you've got to adjust your expectations, and I think you have to shoot for that. I think as an organization, you would be looked down upon, and you would be considered losers for not trying to win that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. You get out there, you got to compete, you got to see what you can do. But I think everybody probably in town is just going to be looking to observe kind of how Miggy looks, how some of the arms look. Does the defense play a little bit better? Winning, I just think that in a 60-game season, you got to get off to a great start. So in my mind, I just don't think they still have enough. I still think that probably, realistically, you probably could look at this team in a 60-game year being probably a 500 team, 30, 35 wins, cap it at maybe 36, 37 wins. But I just want to see improvement. I want to see at least some of the players that we're eyeing get onto the diamond and make some moves. And so that will be what I'll be looking at. But for me, all in all, I just think that slipping into the playoffs does nothing for the Tigers. In my mind, you got to look at it as just another extension of the rebuild. And in order to rebuild, you need more talent. So one more high draft pick in the top 10 would really be awesome in order to retool this team. So that's just my opinion.
Would you take these betting odds? So I think Caesar released their numbers for teams to win the World Series. And I think the Lions are 500 to 1. So you basically bet $1, you'll win 500. Would you run to Caesars and place a $100 bet to win 5,000? And then possibly winning the World Series in a shortened season?
Absolutely not. It'll never happen. No way. You flush your money down the toilet.
What's that number got to be at for you to be able to throw a little bit of money on to win?
Ooh, what kind of odds? You know what? This is going to be fun, too, because of the gambling. Probably, something astronomical where if I throw 1,000, I get 200,000, 100,000 to 1, something like that. Something astronomical, okay. 50,000 to 1, 100,000 to 1, something really crazy where if you put 1,000 down, you get maybe 6 figures back.
See, because I'm more in the boat of if it was 10,000 to 1, I'm there all day.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing a 50 spot on it.
Yeah, you could do that too,
like
as well.
I'm even thinking about it at 500 to 1. I'm even thinking about throwing a couple dollars down because why the hell not?
Right.
Anything could happen. This is going to be a weird season. And don't be surprised if you have a team that is number 1 in all of Major League Baseball and they're hot and they're rocking and rolling. And then next thing you know, they got 3 or 4 guys on their roster that have to be quarantined from the rest of the team. And that team goes into a little bit of a tailspin and it kind of knocks them out of contention and possibly knocks them out of a playoff spot. Because again, baseball's a game of streaks. All you've got to do this season is get hot for 2 weeks at a time. And you figure you get hot at 2 weeks at a time, 2 or 3 times throughout this year, and you end up ripping off anywhere from 10 to 12 wins each of those. I mean, you're already at 36 wins if you do it twice. And then after that, if you just play 500 ball, that's crazy, man. You don't have to play 500 ball. You could play 400 ball, and you're still going to be ahead of where you probably should be.
Now, before we get out of here, we can't ignore the fact that coronavirus has spread all across college football campuses because of the fact group workouts started. Look, we were going to hear about positive tests, but the way in which it's being reported, every single positive test is making its way to our eyeballs. So you caught wind of an article discussing the fact that there's been a lack of college ball. You're hearing whispers that maybe they could even move the season out of the hot zone of coronavirus and into the spring of 2021. But in terms of college football and the NFL, there's a legitimate chance that there's maybe a delay or there's a stop and start period as we work our way through the first wave and maybe into a potential second wave. But tell everybody about this article that you found that may indicate that potentially Michigan football may not be played at the Big House this fall.
So Michigan's going to come out in the next couple weeks and confirm whether or not a Michigan football season is going to take place this spring, whether or not they're going to get their preseason underway and then head into fall with their regular season. And I kind of thought it was an alarming article because this is the first you're hearing about a program shutting down their football season. And the thing is, football is a huge moneymaker for schools. There's a ton of cash for colleges that get wrapped up in their football programs. And especially a school like Michigan where you've got the Big House and you've got 110,000 people and you figure just the revenue from the gate alone is a crazy influx of money. So for Michigan to be pondering shutting down their football program for this season is kind of alarming. I mean, Clemson's had a ton of positive tests come back for coronavirus. And I think Michigan is now, and Ward Manuel is now taking a step back and saying, hey, maybe we don't do this. It looks like as though the university is transitioning everybody for this upcoming school year to all online classes. So if you can't have students on campus and you can't have athletes in a vicinity where they can work out with each other or work with each other or have contact with each other, there's a real strong likelihood that there is no football season this year. And as a Michigan fan, I'm like, there's no way in hell that we're not going to have a football season. There's just no chance. There's just too much money to lose. But as things kind of start to play out and you see what's going on with schools, like I mentioned before, Clemson, there are other schools in the SEC that have been having problems with the coronavirus and getting multiple positive tests. This might be a very, very real ordeal here. I mean, you talked about Florida. Florida has a ton of problems with their coronavirus results that keep coming back. And there is the possibility of having that second wave come, the fall. And that would put you right in line with where football season is going hot and heavy. So it looks as though that maybe Michigan football waves the white flag on having a football season this year. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen because I just think there's too much money tied up there. But the more and more this goes on, it could be a move that Mark Schlissel makes and a move that Ward Manuel makes.
Putting it out there, cuz you're putting out that fear porn like everybody gets worried about. Look, man, I'm just going day by day. If the NFL shuts down, I'll be shocked. If Michigan shuts it down, I just don't see college football accepting the billions and billions lost because of what the ramifications are. I would see that potentially they could announce that, but just potentially collectively work to start the season in February or March and just push everything back where you have it from February till April, May, and then next year you have the NCAA take place in May, June, July. So you just push everything back a little bit until we get this vaccine or treatment. But that's the case. You're putting it out there. Let us know what you think. Did Adam scare the shit out of you by saying that Michigan might not play? Or like potentially some Michigan fans who are like, you know what? If we can get a year off from Harbaugh, that'd be great. We could spend another year looking for that quarterback that's got to get on the field to get some wins. So definitely let us know. Let Adam know on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Let us know at the network at Detroit Podcast. We're still talking about it in regards to how sports are going to progress in the wake of coronavirus. It's going to be there, but could you have expanded rosters? Baseball will be a good model and basketball in the NHL when it starts up. So we're going to have a good 60-day period to evaluate how this is done because of the fact that, we are racing to the starting line, but we may have to pause as we get going in regards to the future of sports because depending on how quickly the virus would spread, you might have, some stops and starts and some things like that. Or you could potentially have where a star player, and we'll talk about it too because there is some room for, and if you have a devious mind like we do, what if, a star player is asymptomatic but reports it. Does the university, does a coach, do we ever hear of 1 or 2 cases where a player has coronavirus, but it's a big game, but nobody reports it because of the fact they're asymptomatic? And hey, if you get a natty, but you spread it to 20 young, healthy people, could that happen? We'll talk about it. Would you be willing to do that if you're in a big game ahead of a championship? What if Michigan has that star quarterback and it's the Ohio State game and he gets it right then and there before the game? We'll talk all about it. We'll talk deviousness. We'll talk a lot more about coronavirus and the opening of sports in future editions of Doc and Jock. Thanks, everybody, for your support. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our content will find you each and every day. All you got to do is search Detroit Sports Podcast wherever your favorite podcast is located. Hit that subscribe button, and then our content finds you. You don't got to do anything extra. Thanks, cuz. This was a fun podcast. I look forward to our next discussion.
Yeah, this one was great, man. We'll talk next week.